Amesyan virayan moksho yapi varsha yuta yutai bala boys dvija the twice born suhrut well-wishers mitra friends pitra parents bhratra brothers guru preceptors druha one who has killed na never may my syat there shall be nirayat from hell moksha liberation he certainly api although varsha years ayuta millions ayutai being added. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. I have killed many boys, brahmanas, well-wishers, friends, parents, preceptors and brothers. Though I live millions of years, I will not be relieved from the hell that awaits me for all these sins. Whenever there is a war, there is certainly a massacre of many innocent living beings such as boys, brahmanas and women, whose killing is considered to be the greatest of sins. They are all innocent creatures, and in all circumstances, killing of them is forbidden in the scriptures. Maharaj Yudhishthir was aware of these mass killings. Similarly, there were friends, parents, and preceptors also on both sides, and all of them were killed. It was simply horrible for him to think of such killing, and therefore, he was thinking of residing in hell for millions and billions of years. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadesh Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. My dear Lord, please guide us also that the emotions we experience during our life journey draw us closer to you and not pull us away from you. Hare Krishna. So today morning, we continue our discussion today on the topic of the role of emotions in spirituality, emotionally healthy spirituality. And I'll continue the framework that I started yesterday. Chit will start with the context. I already explained the context, but we'll focus more on the insight today from a different perspective, and then we'll talk about the takeaway. So yesterday, I started by discussing about how Yudhishthir Maharaj is feeling himself guilty and unworthy of taking up the kingdom. He feels that the war led to a lot of ghastly killing. And at one level, the war itself seems pointless because he lost his sons. He delighted in the killing of his brother Karna, who was later revealed to him as his brother, who chose not to kill him when he had the opportunity to. And then he, Yudhishthira, delighted in the death of Karna whenever that happened, as soon as that happened. So he feels that I'm an unworthy person. What is the point of ruling? But now he's thinking that he's moving forward and he is convinced that what I have done is wrong. So broadly, if we consider Yudhishthira Maharaj's situation, now we can look at whenever we do any action. Now, an action can be evaluated in different ways. So the action can be evaluated as right as wrong by the intent, why it was done. It can be evaluated by the content, what exactly was done. And it can be evaluated by the effect, what resulted from it. So broadly, you can call these three as an acronym ICE. We look at the intent, content, and effect. And in life, deciding what is right and wrong is not very easy. So Yudhishthir initially starts in his early life with focusing on intent. So you could say the young Yudhishthir. So that's why when he goes out for gambling, when he's invited for gambling, he thinks that I should respect my elders. My elders have called me, my uncle, who's like my surrogate father, has called me for gambling. I cannot refuse him. So he focused on intent. And then as he focused on intent, that my intent is good. My intent is that if I disobey him, the relationship will get strained. And then the conflict between us may escalate. If I obey him, then the relationships may stay better. But what he didn't consider adequately was that when we are obeying someone, is that person well-intentioned? Is that person our well-wisher? So till that point, Dhritarashtra had kept on a mask of neutrality, more or less. He had not exactly or openly, explicitly acted in ways partisan towards his son, Duryodhana. But in that gambling match, his mask of neutrality just fell off. He started gleefully inquiring, has Draupadi been won? What has been won in the gambling match? And so, broadly, Yudhishthira recognizes that while good intentions are important, good intentions are not good enough. So, eventually, when he contemplates the war, he thinks that at that time my intention was good, but the effect was terrible. And therefore, now, before the war, he thinks that if I don't fight, the effect will be terrible. Of course, they discuss the content. Is it right for a Kshatriya to fight? Yes, Kshatriyas are expected to fight a war. That's their duty. So now, young Yudhishthir at the time of gambling, the gambling match. Now, the pre-war, his focus is morely on, this is my duty, and this is what I need to do. I have my duty to my ancestors, I have duty to my citizens, I need to protect them. But now, post-war, his focus has shifted on the effects. And so pre-war, he did not have any hesitation to fight. We know another character who had hesitation to fight. Who was that? Arjuna. And that's when the Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Krishna. So now Arjuna was going to be the main person in the Pandavas' army. Now, practically speaking, it was Bhima who killed more people. Bhima wiped out all the 100 Kauravas. So in terms of numbers, especially in terms of primary warriors, yes, Bhima did kill the 100 Kauravas. But in terms of impact, Arjuna would slay far more people with his arrows, and he slayed far more influential warriors. Bhishma, Drona, Karna. So Arjuna had that attack of conscience before. Because see, when we have to fight with someone, if we know that person is our enemy, and we have to attack that person, we won't have that much hesitation. But if that person is respectable for us, venerable for us, and we have to attack that person, that's when the hesitation comes. So Bhima had no compunction to fight. Arjuna had, because he knew it was going to be his calling, his duty, his responsibility to bring down Bhishma and Drona. Now, after the war, Arjuna doesn't have any reservation about what has happened. Krishna's words have convinced him. But Yudhishthir is having not just reservation, but deep regret, remorse. And he feels that I am culpable. For enthroning me, this kingdom has happened. So Yudhishthir is focusing on the effect, and he's saying that the effect has been so devastating. The sin of what I did is so immeasurable that I'll have to suffer for Ayuta. Ayutai is described that. For millions and millions of years, I will have to suffer in hell for this. So he is thinking that I am utterly unworthy of being the king. So his reasoning is multifold. At a social level, he feels that I'm not a protector. I was the cause of the destruction. At an individual level, he feels that there is so much sin upon me that better I renounce the world and perform exclusive austerity to try to atone for the sins. So both ways, his Yudhishthir's hesitation, his refusal, it comes from both in terms of the social role he has to play. Socially, he feels I'm unworthy. Why I'm unworthy? Because I did not protect, I caused the death. And individually, he feels I am not just guilty, but hugely guilty. I'm colossally guilty. And because of these feelings, he says, I cannot fight. So here we see these emotions are coming in the way of his doing his duty. And in general, in the past, people understood that they were accountable for their actions. That now most people think that if I'm just smart enough to dodge the consequences, then I've got away. Once a person was pulled over by a traffic cop for speeding, and the traffic cop asked him, did you see the speed limit sign? He said, yeah, I saw the speed limit sign. I just didn't see you. So the idea is that if we can break the rules without being caught, then that is good enough. But the principle of karma is that we may not be caught immediately, but we will be caught. So Yudhishthira is not thinking, I'll get enough power, and because I've got so much power, I will not be held accountable for my actions. That's the idea of dictators now in the world. Any dictator, any autocrat, they think that if I can get enough power, I can destroy all my rivals, I can crush all dissidents, then I can get away with whatever I do. That is not the thinking of Yudhishthira. He is recognizing that my actions will have consequences. Now his thinking is misinformed, and we'll discuss that. So continuing our framework yesterday I talked about the acronym C. You remember what is the C? Yes, something? Yes. I talked about how in the material existence, it's like a C. So situations from outside, they are external. They trigger emotions inside us. And those emotions trigger actions, which are again outside us. And to the extent these three keep happening, situations are least controllable for us. When the situations come upon us, then they trigger emotions, then we act in particular ways, and thus we get swept away. So these three, they have the waves of material existence come upon us in the form of situations, emotions, and actions. So yesterday in the session I talked about situations and how we need to have safety and security. So safety is for problems that we can anticipate. which can accidentally come upon, which can just by the course of nature, things can go wrong. So safety means that we make sure that if a plane is flying, that the plane does not have any technical issues. That's a safety check. That the plane does not crash. Security means that we don't allow anyone who get into the plane who will deliberately cause the plane to crash. So basically, natural problems and intentional human problems. Both we try to, as much as possible, be responsible, be proactive, so that disturbing situations don't come in our life. And in many ways, this is the responsibility of a Kshatriya, of a manager, of a leader. That Kshatriyas, they minimize the disruptions that come in life. Now, we cannot remove disruptions completely. I discussed about how if we try to have too little control, then there will be chaos, and that will lead to frustration among people. But if there is too much control, that will lead to suffocation among people. They'll just not have any autonomy, and that will also lead to frustration. So we talk about situations. Now we will talk about emotions. That even when we create some systems of safety and security, by which we try to minimize the provocative situations that come. So we are having a class over here. It is not in the middle of the class somebody comes, oh, there is no food for cooking prasad today. No, that should be planned beforehand. We should have some food so that we can sit and peacefully hear the class. So we try to create some order by which situations are relatively orderly. But in spite of the best that we try to do, situations will become disorderly, because we cannot have absolute order in the world. So there will be disturbing situations, there will be provocative situations, and the situations will trigger emotions. So when the situations trigger emotions, how do we deal with the emotions? That's what we're going to discuss today. So now, emotions can be broadly classified. Often we classify them as positive and negative. Like happiness is a good emotion, distress is a bad emotion, or a negative emotion, we can say. So often we may classify them as pleasant or unpleasant. And that's one way of classifying them, and we may try as much as possible to avoid unpleasant emotions. But another more constructive way in the light of dharma is those emotions that are helpful and those emotions that are unhelpful. So helpful means they are helpful for us in doing our dharma, doing our part. It could be our role in society, it could be our service to Krishna, whatever it is. So which emotions are helpful and which emotions are not helpful? And so first of all, when we experience an emotion, we have at the highest level in the nectar of devotion is described that Chitrak and Patrakar, the servants of Krishna, and when they are fanning Krishna, they behold the beautiful form of Krishna, and seeing that beauty, tears start coming from their eyes because they're so ecstatic. However, they consider that ecstasy unhelpful because that is impeding them in their service to Krishna. They're thinking that, where does Krishna need to be fanned? We will not be able to see properly if our eyes are filled with tears. So even joy is considered unfavorable if it impedes our service to Krishna. Now, love and separation is considered the highest emotion in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. Why is that? Because when there is separation, there is increased remembrance, there is increased longing, increased absorption. And it's not a pleasant experience to be separated from the Lord. But to be absorbed in the Lord is the supreme fulfillment. And in that sense, it's considered helpful, love and separation. So that way, emotions, it's much more constructive to categorize them as helpful or unhelpful. Now let's consider a specific emotion that Yudhishthira is experiencing right now, guilt. Now, is guilt helpful or unhelpful? Now, it depends. Two things, that we look at it, the the feeler of guilt, the person who is feeling the guilt, we look at them, for them is it favorable, and the causer of guilt. Causer means, like, some people may speak or do things which make us feel guilty. And sometimes it's used again, you are sending others on a guilt trip. Like an ego trip is there, a guilt trip is there. So we look at from both perspectives. When we feel guilt, is it, then the emotion is coming, is it favorable or is it unfavorable? It depends on what is actually happening. Say, for example, if I am here and the right thing, ultimately the right thing is to serve Krishna, but Krishna is on one side and the wrong thing is on the other side. Maya is on the other side. So guilt should come as a barrier between me and Krishna. So if guilt is here, between me and the wrongdoing, between me and Maya, that means if I get angry, if I indulge in an unhealthy way, in some unholy pleasure, then after that I feel guilt, which acts as a deterrent for me to do the same thing again. That guilt is healthy. But if guilt comes between me and the right thing to do, that means the guilt as an emotion, if it obstructs me from doing the right thing, if it makes me feel so discouraged, so dirtied, so contaminated, so fallen, that I feel just I cannot do this only, then that guilt is generally unfavorable. That guilt is unhelpful. So when I say helpful, unhelpful, that is the framework which the Bhakti Rasamrita talks about as anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjana. So unhelpful and helpful, if you want to use it as what is favorable and what is unfavorable. So the guilt that stops us from serving Krishna, that is unfavorable guilt. Say, if we make some mistake in our service to Krishna, if somebody gives a class and they speak something wrong in the class, and they make a point which is wrong, should they feel guilty about it? Okay, yeah, I have to be careful. But because of that, they become so paralyzed that they think, I'll never speak again. That is not healthy. So in the case of Yudhishthir, where is his guilt coming right now? Is it coming between him and wrongdoing, or between him and his responsibility? What do you think? Yes, between him and his responsibility. So his guilt is pratikul. Like some people say that I am so sinful that if I come to the temple will become contaminated. That is apparent humility, but it is ego pretending to be humility. That means my capacity to make things impure is more than Krishna's capacity to purify. It's like somebody saying, I won't bathe in the Ganga because I am so sinful that the Ganga will become sinful by bathing. No, that's not going to happen. Now, this does not mean that our guilt cannot sometimes stop us from doing certain things. Yes, certain prominent roles somebody may not take and should not take. If somebody has mishandled some cash or some Lakshmi, or somebody has become very angry in a public forum with someone, then maybe they should not take the service which will make them vulnerable to that same misgiving again, same anartha again. So somebody who has a weakness towards consuming a lot of prasad, maybe, just maybe, they should not be in charge of Mahaprasad, isn't it? So it is possible also that sometimes as a deterrence, as a protection, we may stop doing certain things. But that should not be because of guilt. That should be because of caution. Sometimes after experiencing that, we tend to succumb in particular situations to certain situations, certain temptations, that we don't take up those roles. That is caution. So guilt should be primarily to stop us from doing the wrong thing. This is a bad thing, I should not be doing this. So in that sense, guilt is somewhat similar to fear. Some people say conquer your fears. Well, no. Fear itself is not a bad thing. Fear actually is a natural pointer to danger. And when we feel some fear, that's actually quite likely pointing us to some danger. If a small kid is peering out of a 10-story building, out of a terrace or a window, and is peering way out and there's a risk of falling down, the mother says, move away from there. It's dangerous. This kid says, I don't feel any fear. The mother will say, that's why I feel so much fear. Isn't it? So fear can be a protector. Okay, there's danger over here. Don't go in this direction. However, so just as fear protects us from danger, generally fear protects us from some danger that we might get ourselves into. Guilt protects us from we doing something bad. So fear is more functional. We could say fear is associated more with functional danger. Guilt is associated more with moral danger. That you're doing something which is morally dangerous. It should not be done. But so fear and guilt both are good in that sense. Fear points us to physical or practical, you could call it, not necessarily physical, sometimes there can be emotional fear also. But fear is generally associated with functional danger. That if I do this, this person will get very angry with me. That's functional danger. Guilt is associated with more with moral danger. That, oh, this is wrong. It's not just people will be angry with me, but this is wrong and therefore I should not do this. But just as fear can misfire, that means somebody may feel afraid when actually there is no reason to be afraid also. So somebody should not go very close to a mountain cliff or go very close to the edge of a parapet wall on a high terrace. But if somebody says that I will not go into a high-story building, a multi-story building, or they say I will not take a house on the 5th floor or 5th floor or the 10th floor or whatever, the fear becomes too much for them. That is not healthy. So if that's where your friend stays, if that's where your house is, if that's where a temple is, then we shouldn't be stopped from going there. In India, in one city, ISKCON has become a very good brand in India now. So it's a reputed brand. Many big companies want to work with ISKCON. So there are many big construction firms. They say that we will build a big complex, and within that we will build a temple for ISKCON. And then they will advertise the temple. Oh, in our complex we'll have ISKCON temple. And then people also buy houses because of that. Wherever ISKCON temple comes in, the property prices are rising. So there's one place in India where they're going to build a big, like a 35-story or a 40-story skyscraper. And they said the top 3 stories will be ISKCON temple. So it would have been the highest ISKCON temple in the world. So, and some of the ISKCON leaders said that if there's a fire hazard, we'll have lots of crowds of people. So if there's a fire hazard or something like that, we don't want the top floors, we want the bottom 3 floors. So now practically that is true, but the builder was he's at the bottom floors we wanted for, it's like realistic, we wanted for shops and other things. But anyway, now we are having that at the bottom 3 floors. So the idea is that sometimes some fears are valid and there's a caution that needs to be taken. But sometimes some fears may be just a person becoming paranoid. Like that, guilt also can become excessive. So when guilt stops us from doing the right thing, or stops us from doing the wrong thing, that guilt is good. But say if I'm giving a class and somebody is not behaving properly, maybe somebody is sleeping in the class or somebody is distracting others in the class, and something from within me feels I should yell at this person, put that person in their place. Now, if something tells me don't do this, don't do this. Don't make a scene over here. So that is something which is cautious. That is good. But if something from me says, that, last time you yelled at that person, you made a scene, therefore you should never speak in a classroom. That's not healthy. So guilt, when we talk about emotions, we need to be able to process whether the emotion is helping us in our service or hindering us in our service. And that's why emotions cannot be evaluated in isolation. Is a particular emotion good or bad? We have to, all emotions have to be evaluated in the context of the role, the responsibility, the service, the purpose. The same emotion could in one person be favorable, in another person be unfavorable, depending on the context. That is it helping the person to do the right thing, or is it stopping the person from doing the right thing? So that's why the person, so rather many times we try to deal with emotions. I should not feel like this. Sometimes we may, while we are chanting, we might feel bored. Now we say, I should not feel bored. We feel absorbed in Krishna. Now, that's true. But if we are feeling bored while we are chanting, at that time, rather than feeling guilty about it, should say, okay, how can I, at a functional level, try to create more interest in chanting? Maybe I should read more about the holy name. Maybe I should, if I'm hearing class and I start feeling bored during the class, then I can think of, okay, my mind is saying, I've heard this point before. Okay, I have heard this point before. When had I heard it before? In what context was that? In what context is this point being spoken right now? Is there a different example? Is there something more to learn over here? If I'm speaking this point, would I speak the same point if I'm giving, or would I speak some other point to convey this? So we could ask questions and create curiosity. So sometimes you might feel bored because the speaker is boring. Now that is also possible. And then now some of us may not have the bandwidth to come every day for a class. Then we may decide which speakers I want to attend, which speakers I don't want to attend. If we are hearing classes online, which speakers do we prefer to hear, which speakers we don't prefer to hear. That shouldn't be based on emotion alone, but emotion is one component in that. So my point is that emotions, when we are evaluating them, when I say favorable and unfavorable, that favorable or unfavorable, that clearly depends on the context and the purpose. So later on, when Bhishma will speak to Yudhishthir, he will talk to him about the bigger purpose, the bigger plan. Tasyanu vihito rajan. He says ultimately everything is happening within the plan of the Lord. And therefore, even if you are feeling terrible right now, if the Lord wants you to be of service, then you should do the service. The Lord wants you to be the king, you should take up the responsibility of being a king. So now, when we are given some responsibility and we feel hesitant to take up that responsibility, should we take up that responsibility? If we are giving a service, maybe we are told to give a class, we are told to do pujari services. Maybe in the early years of our movement, the very young devotees were given sannyas. Now later on, many of them had difficulties because they're just too young, too untrained, and not pure enough. So if we are given some responsibility, should we take it because it's coming from a senior authority and we should take it, and along with it the empowerment will come? Well, we should always have the attitude that we want to serve and we want to serve more. At the same time, it is we who have to live with ourselves. It is we who have to live with the consequences of our actions. Therefore, Prabhupada would say that we have to fly our own plane. That means that if somebody tells me to fly a plane that I'm not trained to fly, and they say, no, you will learn on the job. Well, maybe that's possible. But if that plane is carrying 5,000 people, and if I crash land, it's going to be devastating. So we also have to take responsibility for our choices. Just because, so Yudhishthir, when he's showing this point that he's thinking, should I take this responsibility or not? He's showing the thoughtfulness, and we also need to have that thoughtfulness. Whether I so when I feel some hesitation about doing something, that hesitation cannot just be dismissed as as faithlessness or cowardice. It is, we also have to consider it. Maybe this is favorable, maybe it is not favorable. So we evaluate it based on context. Generally, broadly speaking, with respect to emotion, whether it is guilt or fear or anger, we could go towards two extremes. One is that we repress it. The other is we express it. In between is what we do is we process it. So when we say repress means we bury it inside us. Express means repress means it's buried. Express means it's acted on. Whereas process means we consider our dharma. We consider what is my role, what is my responsibility. And along with that, we consider our adhikar. So adhikar is our capacity. What is my capacity? Can I do this service? So is it my responsibility? And is it in my capacity? So when you consider these two factors, then we can better we can address the underlying emotion. Okay, when I'm feeling some fear while doing something, when I'm feeling some anger while doing something, when somebody is making me angry because they are not on time, they are not responsible, they're not competent, then should I act on that anger or should I bury that anger? It depends. It depends on what is my responsibility, what is my capacity to consider and then process the emotion appropriately. And now I talked about, say, somebody else makes us feel that emotion. Say, for example, somebody else makes us feel guilty. Now, guilt is a very preferred tool of choice in religious organizations to keep people under their thumb by the authorities. So especially in the Catholic tradition, the Catholic guilt is considered to be quite infamous. So the whole idea is that we are all guilty, and every week you have to go and make a confession. And by reminding yourself of how guilty you are, you feel yourself lower and you keep obeying the church authorities. Now, in the Protestant tradition, guilt is not emphasized so much. The idea of confession is not there. But the idea is, if someone is constantly making us feel unworthy, inadequate, guilty, is that favorable or is that unfavorable? Well, it depends again. It depends on if that person is our well-wisher and if that person is pointing out some valid shortcomings that we need to address. Sometimes what happens, our voice of conscience has become too weak and too muted, so that even when we do something wrong, we don't feel anything wrong about it. Like some people may speak very insensitively or harshly and they're completely nonchalant about it. That, okay, so what's the big deal? You should develop a tough skin. You don't be such a snowflake. No, but sometimes we may be unnecessarily hurting others. So when the causer is there, when we consider a guilt causer. So is that person a good influence in our life or a bad influence in our life? Again, it depends. That is that person not just wanting us to become better, but is that person also encouraging us, aiding us to become better? That means, now somebody may be a well-wisher, but they constantly keep chastising somebody. They keep constantly making the other person feel guilty. Prabhupada worked so hard to write his books. Can't you find some time to read your books? What kind of follower of Prabhupada are you if you don't read his books? Now, that is guilt-induced self-study of scripture. We want inspiration-induced. Prabhupada has given so much wisdom. The scriptures contain so much wisdom. We want to benefit from it. We want to be empowered by it. So, if somebody constantly keeps using guilt as a tool for compliance, then we have to consider the intention of that person. Maybe the intention is good. Maybe the intention is bad. They just want to keep us under their thumb. But even when the intention is good, we also have to consider what is the effect on us. If we are constantly feeling discouraged, insecure, and we are constantly doubting ourselves. Some people become incapable of doing anything without having some approval from someone else. They completely lose their own capacity for taking initiative and using their intelligence. And that is not healthy. So, are they aiding us in our decision making? Are they aiding us in doing better things? Or are they making us more crippled and more dependent? If you see, Krishna himself is God. And when Arjuna is undecided, Krishna could have just given him a decision. Krishna could have finished the whole Bhagavad Gita in 6 words. I am God, obey me, fight. Bhagavad Gita, Sampurnam. It is over. Krishna did not do that. Krishna did want Arjuna just to do the right thing. Krishna wanted Arjuna to develop the decision-making faculty, so that in future, if Krishna is not there also, Arjuna should be able to make good decisions. So in that sense, the wanting and the aiding. So both need to be considered. Is that person my well-wisher? And is that person actually helping me to become a better person? That person helping me to become a better decision maker, better chooser? Or is that person making me more and more dependent on that person for decision making? So that is not healthy. So that way guilt can be processed. And more or less within that, I already brought out the takeaway. But the takeaway for us is that when we are trying to process emotions, to process emotions, we cannot put the emotions first. Process emotions, we need to have put our purpose, put our dharma, put our role and responsibility first. It is only when we do that, then, say for example, in the morning when I wake up and I don't feel like waking up. So should I wake up and do my sadhana? Is that feeling favorable or unfavorable? Well, my purpose should be first. Okay, my purpose is to serve Krishna. My purpose is to become purified so that I can love Krishna more. And Prabhupada was asked once, now if our purpose is to serve Krishna, why is Maya so strong? And Prabhupada replied, it's because your purpose is not strong. So we can't evaluate the strength of Maya. Oh, I feel like eating this. I feel like watching this. I feel like going there. Okay, should I do this or should I do this? We have to, if we make our purpose strong, then we will be able to evaluate our emotions. We will be able to process our emotions. And that way, we won't be suppressing our emotions when the emotions are telling us something worthwhile, something important. At the same time, we won't be just succumbing to our emotions and going away from our purpose. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. Broadly, in emotionally healthy spirituality, we discussed about processing emotions today. So in processing emotions, the context that we discussed was how Yudhishthir Maharaj is feeling great guilt. And Yudhishthir Maharaj's guilt, it is because he has in some ways evolved. We discussed about how when an action is to be evaluated, it can be based on intent, content, or effect, the ICE acronym. So in the gambling match, he was focusing on the intent. I should obey my elders. In the pre-war, he thought this is my duty because this is what a Kshatriya is meant to do. But post-war, he's thinking that the result has been so devastating that I am unworthy to be a king. So we talk about Yudhishthir. He feels socially, I am unworthy to be a king. And individually, personally, I am guilty. I caused the death of people whom I meant to protect. How can I be a king? But by causing that death, I am so guilty that I should just give up the kingdom and go to the forest and renounce. So in terms of insight, we discussed about whenever there's an emotion, how do we evaluate the emotion? We could evaluate the emotion based on whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, but that is a superficial way of evaluating. A healthier way to evaluate is whether it is based on, is it favorable or unfavorable? At favorable what? Favorable to my dharma, favorable to the part I am meant to play, or is it unfavorable? So we discussed with respect to favorable or unfavorable. How do we decide what is favorable or unfavorable? So we discussed how, whether its effect is what I talked about. For example, guilt. Is guilt good or bad? So it depends. Is guilt stopping me from what is bad, or is it stopping me from doing the bad thing, or stopping me from doing the good thing? So if guilt is coming in between me and the bad thing, it is good. It's coming between me and the good thing, it is bad. So whenever we have to evaluate an emotion, we can't just crush the emotion saying I won't listen to it, or we can't just give in to the emotion saying that that's what I will do. I let it guide my actions. I let it control my actions rather. Instead, we want to process the emotion. And we discussed that both with respect to guilt, the person who is, with respect to there is the person who is feeling the guilt and who is causing the guilt to be felt. So our feeling, we need to make sure that we are doing the right thing. We are encouraged to do the right thing. We feel encouraged to do the right, not stopped. So we may be cautious about taking on particular roles, but we overall feel encouraged to do the right thing. And when somebody is causing the guilt, we need to look at what their intent is, what are they intending, and are they actually aiding us? Are they helping us to make better decisions, or is their guilt making us feel insecure? Is it making us more fearful and losing in self-confidence, or is it helping us to become more thoughtful so that we can think through situations and make decisions? And finally, the takeaway was that for us to evaluate any emotion, so if I'm feeling any emotion and I want to evaluate that emotion, what I need to make sure is that my purpose is bigger. So to the extent I make my purpose bigger, my service, my responsibility, my role bigger, then in the light of that bigger purpose, we will be able to evaluate the emotion. The emotions cannot be evaluated in isolation. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Is there any question or comment? Yes, Lakshman.
Thank you very much. Just a general question about how Yudhisthira is feeling guilty. So, to me, it's unusual that it would be Arjuna at the very beginning that's hesitating to fight. And Yudhisthira, I would have thought that if anyone would have been hesitating on the battlefield when all the relatives are there, it would have been Yudhisthira. Is that just because it's to facilitate the Leela, or is there something?
Okay. So before the war, why is it that Yudhishthir does not feel any hesitation given his nature? Well, before the Bhishma Parva, which is where the war occurs, is the Udyoga Parva. The Udyoga Parva is where the two things are happening. That they are trying to form alliances and they are also trying to do negotiations to prevent war. So like typically in military, the strategy is that you hope for the best and prepare for the worst. So like that, they were hoping for the best, that the war will not occur. And that's why Krishna also himself finally went as a peace negotiator. Now, at that time, Yudhishthir has elaborate discussions with Krishna, with Drupada, with the Brahmins. And at that time, for him, the ethics of the war have already been deliberated. So in that sense, whatever reservation he might have had, that has been addressed by the pre-war consultations and deliberations. Now, Arjuna was also part of those pre-war deliberations. But for Arjuna, especially the gravity, the irreversibility, the cruelty of it all, it registered in him at that particular time. Because two things. First is, it was Arjuna who got that urge to go in the middle of the two armies. And there was a part of him that hoped that he would not have to fight against Bhishma and Drona. He had fought against them before, just a few months earlier at Virat, but at that time there had been no intention to kill them. It was just to teach them a lesson that we are powerful enough, we can hold ourselves against you, we can defeat you also. And that was something which they helped would also lead to peace negotiation and settling of peace on better terms. But now the stakes were much higher. Now one side would not go back alive. So he was also hoping that maybe Bhishma and Drona would have some hesitation that I'm like the child, I'm like their grandchild. Not only as I'm Bhishma's, like my Bhishma's grandchild, and I'm Drona's favorite student. So the fact that they showed absolutely no hesitation, they were completely ready to fight, that also shook him. So for him, now of course we can say it is the Leela of the Lord, and that the Lord wanted to speak the Bhagavad Gita through his dearmost Pandava, that was Arjuna. No doubt that's true also. But at a more, not a transcendental level, but at an ethical level, it was because Arjuna had the primary responsibility to fight with and kill the two people who were dearest to them on the opposite side, Bhishma and Drona. And because when he came in the middle of the battlefield, he saw that they seemed to have no hesitation to fight. That's what triggered the hesitation. Is this the right thing? Are we really going to do this? Is this war really going to happen? And that's when he felt that not just ethical angst, but existential angst, because of which he sought Krishna's wisdom in the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you. Any other quick question or comment? Yes, bro.
Just wondering a bit more detail if, let's say we identified one emotion which is kind of unfavorable for us in our service. I don't know if there's a general way how we could best try to change that emotional state to the way which is more favorable.
So if we identify an emotion that is unfavorable for our bhakti, then we have to see that sometimes we may have to change the situation itself. One of the principles of bhakti is that we need not just association of devotees, but also like-minded association. So if somebody is very interested in studying Shastra, and they are at a particular place where the whole focus is to build a temple, and everybody is told to go out and raise funds for building a temple. Now, yes, that's also important service, but if that service, it says first we have to build a temple, so you raise funds. Now we have built a temple, you have to maintain the temple, so raise funds. And then a person who wants to study scripture is made to feel guilty for the desire to study scripture. Now, then they may decide that if I have the ability, I have the interest, I have the commitment to study scripture, then I need association of those who are more scholarly minded, those who are more scriptures, those who are sajati, those who are like-minded. So we don't disrespect the devotees who may have another definition of success in bhakti, but we may not be able to gel with that definition completely. So now that does not mean we constantly keep going from rejecting one devotee and another devotee and rejecting this association, rejecting all that association. You'll never find a perfect community anywhere. Even like-minded devotees are not alike. So there'll be difference always, but it's that we should overall feel inspired and energized to practice bhakti. And that's why seeking like-minded association is important. So if in some situations, some unhealthy emotion is coming constantly for us, or some unpleasant emotion, unfavorable emotion is coming for us constantly, then we may need to change the situation itself. Now, in some other cases, we need to see how I can manage that emotion and push on so that I can go beyond that emotion. So for example, if you're fasting and we feel very uncomfortable while fasting, But you may decide, okay, this is the poison in the beginning, the nectar will come thereafter. Yattadagre vishamiva pariname amrutopam. So then let me learn to push on. Let me see maybe what I can do, how I can absorb myself so that I can push on. So sometimes basically when an unfavorable emotion is coming, sometimes we need to change the situation. Sometimes we need to change our own focus, what we are paying attention to. Yes, I'm feeling uncomfortable because of this, but there is a higher purpose being served through this. So if we shift our focus to something else, shift our focus to our purpose, then the emotion becomes a little more manageable. Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Hare Krishna. We have a question online from Mohini Mataji. She's asking how to prioritize my service to Karuna Bhavan temple, my family duties, and work. I tie myself with knots of guilt and exhaustion to do it all.
Okay, it's a big question. Can we discuss this tomorrow? Because in the actions, I'm going to talk about this. Is that okay with me? So I will talk about it tomorrow because situations, emotions, and actions, how to balance, I'll talk about that. Okay, thank you. Yes, Manoj.
Just a quick one. So you mentioned about the intent, content, and the effect. So in terms of the intent, because sometimes maybe they have the right intent, but it's not shown outside. You don't know, but we only see the effect of what, for example, with the we only see the word. We don't know the background knowledge.
Correct.
So should we like voluntarily speak to them and understand what the intent? Because normally that's not practical to, so how would we
Okay.
be in that situation?
So it's difficult to know someone's intent. And if they are doing something which seems to be a bit making us uncomfortable or something's questionable, then should we talk with them about to understand their intent? Well, yes, sometimes if we are doing a serious service with someone, and if we are also seriously committed to that service, then sometimes that will require us to have some difficult discussions, because because we are investing ourselves in the service, somebody else is also investing themselves in the service, and if they want us to be fully invested, then we have to try to understand them. Okay, you're spending so much money on renovating this particular thing in the temple, and you want me to raise funds for that, but is this really this important? Or do we need this, or what funds we have got, do we need it for this right now? So what's the vision over here? So asking that is not a wrong thing. So questioning somebody's intent is not necessarily questioning their ethics, but it could also try to understand their vision, understand their judgment. That's something which is important if we are to be invested in that. But if we feel uncomfortable asking that, then okay, that's what you want to do, you do it. I'm not really so invested in it. And in general, there are two aspects to consider, that sometimes we may be expert in the particular field, and somebody else might not be that expert. See, good intention will please Krishna, but good intention alone is not enough in this world. To do things in this world, Jatayu had the good intention to protect Sita, but he just did not have the skills. He did not the skills, you could say he did not have the speed because of his age, by which he could, or the speed and the stamina. Initially he was fast enough, but he didn't have the stamina because of his age, because of which he just couldn't sustain the fight against Ravan, and he was killed. So in this world, the results don't come based only on the intentions. We also have to consider the content of what we are doing. Once the devotees asked, and the devotees had done Rath Yatra, I think, here only in London, and it is one of the first Rath Yatras, and they made a big Rath Yatra cart. But then somehow they made it bigger than what was used in America, but they did not proportionately enlarge the wheels of the Rath cart. And when they were actually doing the Rath Yatra, the Rath collapsed. And it was a disaster. Of course, they managed it quite well. But they wrote to Prabhupada and asked Prabhupada, did the Rath collapse because of our poor devotion? And Prabhupada replied to them, it collapsed because of your poor engineering. Poor engineering. So the point is that in this world, the functional aspect is also important. Hmm. And so sometimes, if say there's one temple in India where one devotee was civil engineer, and the temple leader was very eager to complete the construction of the temple by a particular date, and he was going to have a big festival to inaugurate the temple. And the ceiling that he was building for the temple hall structure, it actually was not strong enough. Its load bearing capacity was not strong enough to sustain the whole structure. And he was advised by some other civil engineer or something. Somehow he had made that decision. Now this devotee, I knew this person. He was a very intelligent person. He asked me, "What should I do?" No, the temple leader was a very, very senior devotee, and he said, "I cannot question his judgment, but at the same time, if the program is going on at that time, the roof crashes and there are casualties. What that would be terrible." So I told him that here, it's not that you are questioning the temple president or the temple leader. You are actually protecting the community. You're protecting the movement. And you can be polite and respectful, but you also have to make your point clear. So my point is that intention might be good, but sometimes the content may not be right at that particular time. Say if somebody can't cook for Krishna, somebody is not very good at cooking, and they are told cook for a big festival, and they are very prayerful. They have a big nice picture of Radharani, they have kirtan of Radharani going on, they pray to Krishna, and they cook. They cook in a very, very prayerful mood. Krishna will be pleased with their cooking, but only Krishna will be pleased. If they can't cook, so in the world, competence is also required for services. Okay. So, thank you very much. Shri Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Yeah. So I have got a few books. The new books which come from last time. This is Gita for the CEO. This is describing